The other thing is, Joseph said I could talk for an hour and 45 minutes, so I'm taking him up on that. But about every 10 minutes or so, I'm going to take a very short break for questions or comments, and that's a good time if people need a quick bathroom break or a coffee break. Anything else I should say? I think that's it.
No, yeah, I think just that you're open for questions. I think that's the key message, and I guess once we're all done, in about 2 hours' time, we'll just have a few closing reminders for tomorrow, and then there's still wine and stuff out there and dessert if people, or coffee or anything, it'll stay around for the next 2 hours. Thank you.
Okay. What do children need most? Most. You probably already know this. They need to be loved. They need to feel that you care about them. They need to be sure that you care about them. Scott Peck wrote in The Road Less Traveled, children who are truly loved know themselves to be valued. This knowledge is worth more than gold. Jerome Frank, many years ago, in the 1960s, wanted to try to determine which form of psychotherapy is the best. So he studied psychoanalysis, Rogerian, cognitive behavioral, all the different kinds of psychotherapy. And to his great regret, it didn't matter a twit which kind of psychotherapy the clinician thought he was practicing. What mattered was the relationship between the patient and the therapist. If the patient felt cared about, the patient tended to get better. And then, he wrote, a totally untrained therapist who exercises a great capacity to love will achieve psychotherapeutic results equal to the best. And more recently, in 2001, Bruce Wampold did another review of all the different kinds of psychotherapy and came up with the same conclusion. The client-therapist relationship trumps technique, hands down. The same is true for parents and teachers. They've looked at what's the most important variable in successful early childhood programs. What is the most important variable for a quality program? And the most important thing is not the number of kids, it's not the adult-child ratio, and it's not having the best materials. It's the caring relationship between those adults and those children. So you don't have a lot of money, you can't afford the newest toys or gadgets, it doesn't matter. Your humanity is more important than material possessions or even doing the textbook perfect thing. And many mothers who don't have much means feel like they're going to fail their child. They can't buy them the fanciest things and they can't give them all the privileges, but they can give them the love. And that's what the children need most. This is just to say this again. You can do everything that they say in the books to do for children, and it doesn't work out right. You can do a lot of things that the books say you probably shouldn't do, but it's coming from the love, it'll work out fine. Attachment is what we call the love between a baby and a caregiver. Secure attachment is the cornerstone for everything else in life. Interpersonal relations, doing well in school, having the courage to explore and take risks, etc. Before they had the term attachment, Erik Erikson talked about the same thing as basic trust. And he defined that as knowing beyond any shadow of a doubt that you're loved. Feeling that the world is basically a good, safe, trustworthy place, where you'll be helped if you need it, where things make sense and are predictable. And he also called that the cornerstone of a healthy personality. Normally this happens quite naturally, because babies are built to especially like the things that human beings have. They particularly like the human face. They particularly like the human voice. They particularly like the pace at which we normally walk. And we adults are built to especially like babies. So it usually works out pretty well to get attached. But this can often get off track. And Barry Brazelton worked for many years with parents who had a premature baby. Because premature babies are different than full terms in certain important ways for getting that attachment relationship going. One is that they're much slower in their reactions. So you do something and you expect a reaction from the baby. And within the amount of time you expect it, you don't get any reaction. So you think, he doesn't like me, or I'm a failure, or this isn't working. And Barry Brazelton showed with video that if you just wait, you're going to get that reaction. It's just way later than you expected it. And he also showed that what would be normal stimulation for a full term is too much stimulation for the preemie. So the dad who's very vigorous with the baby is not working out well often for the preemie. And he just showed the parents how to get that dance going, that connection between the baby and the parents. Because of the importance of attachment, I want to argue that people need to be as conservative as possible in assigning a child to foster care, because it's incredibly hard to form an attachment to the foster parent. How do you let yourself be vulnerable to fall in love with somebody who might leave you at any moment? By definition, it's not a permanent relationship. By definition, it could be severed at any moment. So how do I risk letting you into my heart when you might leave me at any time? And then there's certain things about the foster care system which remind a child that they're not really part of the family, like when a family takes respite from the foster child. So you need to balance the concern for physical care with the concern for emotional care. And the emotional care argues about being as conservative as possible in removing that child. And I'm also going to talk about later the importance of knowing fully and appreciating your cultural heritage. And if you're fostered out of your community and out of your cultural group, that also has consequences. And we need to think of the emotional life of the child as much as we think about the physical safety. Now, experiences that aren't fully processed create unresolved and leftover issues that can easily get triggered in the parent-child relationship. At these times, we're not acting like the parent we'd like to be and are often left wondering why parenting sometimes brings out the worst in us. The major insight of Mary Main's work is that the direct intergenerational transmission of relationship patterns, while common, is not inevitable. It's not inevitable that you'll abuse your children if you were abused. There are ways for that not to happen. Many parents who experienced abusive or rejecting relationships growing up, in turn, raise children who are insecurely attached to them. That's very common. But other parents with equally unfortunate childhoods who were also abused or had rejecting relationships have children who are securely attached to them. What distinguishes the two groups? It's the ability of the latter group to discuss their childhood experiences with emotional openness, coherence, and reflective insight. They seem to have come to terms with what happened to them and gained an understanding of why their parents behaved as they did. It's not that they make it right. They don't say it's right, it wasn't right, but they can wrap their head around it. They have some understanding of what happened. It's a complete story that they can let go. So the outcome of a secure versus an insecure attachment, it's better to be securely attached. But the outcome can be as good for those insecurely attached if they've organized their attachment experience into a coherent story. Painful feelings we try to ignore or suppress never go away or subside as long as we keep them buried. Jamie Pennybaker wrote, and I'll talk about his work in a minute, actively inhibiting thoughts and feelings takes energy and effort, even though you may not realize it. It takes effort not to think about something or to not let one's feelings out. That then reduces the energy and effort you have for other things, such as for defending the body against disease or for the mental effort in school or out. The harder one works at inhibiting, the greater the stress on the body. Over time, the work of inhibition serves as a cumulative stressor. Like other stressors, inhibition, forcing these thoughts and feelings down, can affect immune function and the brain. It increases the probability of illness and stress-related physical and psychological problems. Holding back thoughts and feelings can place you at risk for major disease. I love this. I saw this or something very closely approximated when I visited Australia. And I remembered the sentence, but I don't remember who the author was. The road to recovery begins with giving up the hope of having a better past and concentrating instead on having the best possible future. Because many of us are stuck in the past. And it wasn't right, and it shouldn't have been that way, etc. But you can't change it. It happened. And if you can let it go and be in the past, then you can go on. It's not easy, but it's the way to have a better future. There are two kinds of suffering. First is the suffering that causes more suffering, that we repeat over and over. And that's when we try to push things down and not address them. And what happens is you keep suffering and you keep imposing other suffering on others. The second is the suffering that comes when we stop running. The second kind of suffering can lead to freedom. Confronting our deepest hurts, actively talking or writing about them, and acknowledging the emotions associated with them can have remarkable short and long-term health benefits. Both psychological and physical health improves. And that's largely based on the work of Jamie Pennybaker. He spent his whole career going to communities where there was a natural catastrophe, a fire, a tsunami, an earthquake. And he had some of the people in the community keep a private journal. They didn't talk to some sympathetic other. They just kept a private journal where they were to keep writing about their experience and keep trying to get the emotions out. And he summarized it that if you can get people to talk or write about their problems, their psychological and physical health improves. Writing forces a degree of structure and organization to our thoughts. When writing, the thinking process slows down. The act of repeatedly telling about your experience results in both an organization of the event and a summarizing of it. Over days, the description of the event is gradually shortened and summarized. Constructing stories day by day as you write, the episode takes on the shape of a coherent story. Any type of event is less overwhelming and easier to think about once it's summarized. Once organized, events are smaller and easier to deal with. So this involves prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The amygdala is the part of the brain that starts screaming whenever there's any danger in the environment, whenever there's any reason to feel afraid or feel like you need to flee. So if you see people who are afraid, if you see people who are angry, if you see danger, the amygdala starts going like a fire alarm. And of course, you can't think clearly when there's a fire alarm going. So they did one study, an imaging study, where they showed people faces that displayed certain emotions. And in the first condition, you had to say which word accurately labeled the emotion that the face was showing. In the next condition, they said which face is showing the same emotion as that face. Then they said just watch the face. Another, which name is the appropriate gender for that face, and which face is the same gender as that face, okay? In all of these conditions, when you see that kind of face, the amygdala lights up. The amygdala is more active. Only in that first condition, where you had to assign a verbal label, did amygdala activation go down. And it's not an elaborate verbal label, right? And it's not even really an emotion coming from you. It's coming from seeing this picture of somebody else. But the amygdala starts screaming for everybody. And only when you had to put it into words did the activation go down. In the second condition, presumably you had to somehow figure out what the emotion was, because you had to say which face is showing the same emotion. But that doesn't make the amygdala activation go down. And what happens is prefrontal activation goes up and amygdala activation goes down. Prefrontal kind of calms the amygdala down and says, it's okay, it's okay. Putting feelings into words produces therapeutic effects on the brain. When you put feelings into words, you increase activation in prefrontal cortex, and that produces a reduced response in the amygdala. Okay, so this is a moment for questions or comments, yes? Or bathroom break? Yes? What do I think about families that are in crisis?
So when you think about families that are in crisis, like crisis after crisis, I mean, isn't then where they say that sort of like
Yes. Right, right. So then they've gotten themselves in an unfortunate feedback loop, and they're stuck in that. And they need some help in getting unstuck. Yeah, absolutely.
Would it be fair to say that?
Well, I try to do.
When you think about you're dealing with poverty and whether or not on the table for food and maybe there's addiction, play, but overcharge being more, would it be fair to say that we're looking at?
I think, I don't know the percentage, but I do know if you take just the families that are really having economic difficulty, who are at the poverty line or below or near, those where there's parental warmth in the home,